Okay, so welcome to the deep dive, everybody. Today's topic is a big one. It's one that we get asked about all the time, and you guys sent in a bunch of really interesting stuff, articles, reflections, personal stories, even about life before and after the smartphone.
It's kind of crazy to think about, right? Like, how much has changed in what feels like a pretty short amount of time?
Yeah, I mean, it really does feel like just yesterday we were all carrying around those like clunky old cell phones with the antennas and the
Number pads, yeah. You get to press the 7 button 3 times to get to the letter Q.
Exactly. It's a whole different world, and it's easy to forget what it was like before all of that. But that's what we're here to do today, right? To dive into all the stuff you guys sent in and really pull out the core insights, the stuff that makes you go, huh, I never thought about it that way.
Exactly, because understanding the past, where we've come from, is really crucial to understanding the implications of where we are now and where we might be going.
Totally. So let's try to paint a picture of what that pre-smartphone world was actually like. Imagine wanting to talk to someone and you had to actually use a landline.
Right, you're tethered to the wall, can't move more than 10 feet.
Exactly. Or even crazy. Imagine writing a letter, an actual physical letter.
With pen and paper and an envelope and a stamp.
I know, it's wild. And then to meet up with someone, you had to actually agree on a time and a place in advance and just show up.
No texting to say, hey, I'm running late, or, oh, I forgot I have to do this thing.
Nope, you just had to be there. That was that. And one thing that so many of you brought up was this idea that we used to have to memorize phone numbers, a lot of phone numbers.
Oh yeah, I remember having a little book where I'd write them all down.
Yeah, me too. And it's funny because our brains have basically outsourced that function now, right? We don't even think about it, but that was a thing that our brains used to just do.
Totally. And it makes you wonder what else are brains not doing now because they're busy remembering passwords and stuff.
That's a really good point. And speaking of doing things differently, a lot of you talked about how different social life was before smartphones. I mean, think about it. Kids used to play outside all the time, real physical games, not just staring at screens.
Yeah, and you'd have to actually talk to people face to face to make plans.
Right. There were no group chats or constant social media updates. It was just you hung out with people in person, and that was that.
And a lot of your submissions talked about family dinners being different too, actually sitting down together. No phones at the table, everyone talking to each other.
Yeah, it's kind of sad to think about how rare that is now for a lot of families.
It really is. And, even getting information was a completely different process back then. If you want to know something, you had to go to the library or read a newspaper or wait for the news on TV.
Exactly. And, if you wanted to learn how to do something, you couldn't just YouTube it. You had to figure it out yourself or ask someone who knew.
Right. Or find a book about it at the library and actually read the whole book.
I know, it sounds crazy. And entertainment was different too. You had to watch TV shows when they were actually on.
You couldn't just binge watch an entire season in one night.
Nope. You had to wait a whole week for the next episode. And even travel was different. I mean, imagine trying to get around without GPS.
Forget about it. You had to use a map, a real paper map.
Yeah, those giant ones that you could never fold back up properly.
You had to ask for directions if you got lost.
Which I did all the time.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's funny because looking back at all of the pre-smartphone world, it almost feels like a simpler time in a way.
It definitely had a slower pace, for sure. Less of that constant, always-on feeling that we have now.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And, one of the things that really struck me from all the stuff you guys sent in was this idea that in a lot of ways, life before smartphones was just more intentional. You had to actually make an effort to connect with people, to learn things, to be entertained.
You couldn't just passively consume everything.
Right. And I think there's something really valuable in that, it forced you to be more present, more engaged with the world around you.
I think that's a really important point. And, a lot of your submissions talked about the benefits of that intentionality. For example, stronger human connections, because you had to actually put in the effort to see people and talk to them.
Yeah, and it wasn't just a quick text or on Instagram. It was real conversations, real quality time spent together.
And speaking of quality time, a lot of you also mentioned the potential for more quality family time without the constant distraction of devices.
Yeah, imagine having a family dinner where everyone's actually present and engaged in the conversation, not checking their phones every 5 seconds.
Right, it's almost like a lost art at this point, but it's something that I think a lot of us crave.
And another big benefit that came up was reduced distraction overall. Without all those notifications and alerts and things vying for our attention, we were just able to focus better on whatever we were doing.
Whether it was work or school or just relaxing and enjoying a hobby.
And this is a really interesting point that a lot of you brought up, potentially less stress and anxiety because there wasn't that constant pressure to be connected and to keep up with everyone else's lives.
Right. There was no social media to compare yourself to, no curated highlight reels, just like real life.
Exactly. And I think for a lot of people, that probably led to a greater sense of contentment and peace.
It's hard to say for sure, but it's definitely something to think about.
Yeah.
And a lot of you also mentioned the likelihood of more physical activity because we weren't constantly glued to our screens.
Right. We had to actually get up and move around to do things like go to the library or meet up with friends.
And kids especially spent more time playing outside, running around, getting exercise.
And, this last benefit is a big one, greater privacy. Because there wasn't all this data tracking and hacking and all that stuff that we have to worry about now.
Right. Our lives weren't constantly being documented and shared online.
It's pretty crazy to think about how much that's changed. So, when we look back at the pre-smartphone world, it's clear that there were a lot of potential benefits to that way of life. But of course, it wasn't all sunshine and roses. There were definitely some downsides too.
Absolutely. For one thing, communication could be a real hassle. If you weren't at home, you couldn't just call or text someone whenever you wanted.
Right. You had to wait until they got back or try to find a payphone.
And in emergencies, it could be really difficult to reach someone quickly.
Yeah, that's a scary thought. And another big challenge was navigation without GPS. You could get lost really easily.
Especially in unfamiliar places.
And it could be really time-consuming trying to figure out where you were going.
And speaking of time-consuming, access to information was definitely slower and more limited back then. Like you said earlier, if you wanted to learn something, you had to go to the library or wait for the news on TV.
Right, and the information wasn't always accurate or up to date.
And some of you also mentioned slower emergency response times because it could take longer to find a phone and call for help.
That's a really important point. And finally, staying connected with friends and family who lived far away was much more difficult. You couldn't just video chat with them whenever you wanted.
You had to write letters or make extensive long-distance calls.
So, while the pre-smartphone world had its charms, it definitely had its drawbacks too. But then, of course, the smartphone came along and everything changed.
Yeah, it's hard to overstate how much of an impact smartphones have had on our lives.
I mean, think about it. They've completely revolutionized the way we communicate. We can talk to anyone, anywhere in the world, instantly.
Through calls, texts, video chats, emails, you name it.
And social media, while it has its problems, has made it so much easier to stay connected with people, even if they live far away.
And the access to information that we have now is just mind-blowing. We can learn about anything at any time just by pulling out our phones.
Right. There are YouTube tutorials, online courses, news apps, dictionaries, anything you can think of.
And entertainment has been transformed too, with streaming services and mobile games and all that.
Yeah, we can watch whatever we want, whenever we want, play games, listen to music, all on our phones.
And online shopping has made it so much easier to buy things.
Yeah.
We can literally order anything we need with a few taps on our screens.
And travel has become so much easier with GPS and digital maps.
We never have to worry about getting lost again.
So, it's clear that smartphones have brought a lot of convenience and efficiency to our lives. But as with anything, there are downsides too.
Absolutely. One of the biggest concerns is smartphone addiction. We're spending so much time on our phones that it's starting to interfere with our real lives.
Yeah, we're constantly checking our notifications, scrolling through social media, playing games. It's hard to put them down.
And all that screen time is having a negative impact on our mental health. We're more stressed, more anxious, more depressed.
And we're comparing ourselves to others on social media, which is just making us feel worse.
And then there are the privacy concerns. All the data that our phones are collecting about us and what's happening to that data.
It's kind of scary to think about.
And our physical health is suffering too. We're getting eye strain from looking at screens all the time.
We're developing bad posture from hunching over our phones.
And we're not getting enough exercise because we're sitting around on our phones all day.
And some people are even arguing that all this digital stimulation is actually shortening our attention spans.
It's hard to focus on one thing for very long when we're constantly being bombarded with notifications and updates.
So, it's a mixed bag. Smartphones have brought us a lot of good things, but they've also created a lot of new challenges.
And the question is, how do we find a balance? How do we enjoy the benefits of smartphones without letting them take over our lives?
And I think the key is to be more intentional about our smartphone use, to set limits on our screen time, to make sure we're spending enough time in the real world.
To prioritize face-to-face interactions over digital ones.
And to remember that smartphones are tools they're supposed to make our lives easier, not harder.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the biggest takeaway is that both the pre-smartphone era and the smartphone era have their pros and cons.
Right, neither one is perfect.
And the challenge for us now is to figure out how to use technology in a way that benefits us without harming us.
Exactly. And on that note, we have a final thought-provoking question for you, our listener.
Considering everything we've talked about today, what do you think has had the most profound impact on society, either from the pre-smartphone era or the smartphone era, and why?
Something to think about, maybe even discuss with your friends and family.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
See you next time.